Okay, so we like milkshake, great. So if there's milkshake on the menu today, what I will do, particularly for you, Gaura, because you were so enthusiastic in responding to that question, is I will, without you knowing, of course you're going to know because I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do now, but you have your milkshake in front of you, and I'm just going to pour a load of salt in it, without you knowing. So then we take up the milkshake, and we put it to our lips. Now the first thing we will taste is the actual milkshake. That's what we will taste. Or maybe, let's not salt, I'm going to put a load of sand in it, okay, sand in your milkshake. So the first thing when we taste is we will taste the milkshake, and it will taste normal, and it will taste nice, and we go, oh great, a milkshake. Then we will take a gulp of it, because it tastes so nice, and within a couple of seconds when you go to swallow, it will be a horrible, graty, grindy feeling going down your throat, because it's all sand that's in it, and you will probably spit it out like that. So this world is described like that. There is pleasure, but it's mixed with all this lack of pleasure like that. And the basic things that it's, the four basic problems that come with living in this world. The first one is that we're born. That's the first problem. And it's interesting, birth, because we talk that we live in, particularly here in places like Denmark and Western Europe, that we live in what they call Western liberal democracies. That's what they call them, liberal, and they're democratic. Okay, we all agree with that? We live in a liberal democracy. Yet, none of us in this room, and for that matter, none of us in this town, none of us in this country, none of us on this planet, had any say in being born. It's not that your parents consulted with you prior to conception and said, would you like to be born? We had no say in the matter. It was completely forced on us like that. And then, once we're born, we have the second problem. Immediately we're born, actually immediately we're conceived, it's not even immediately we're born. The second problem that we have is that we start growing old. Big problem. Growing up, who wants to grow old? Hands up in the room, who wants to grow old? You know, if you go down to Copenhagen, I'm sure it's like every other city in Western Europe, America, whatever, you'll find loads of billboards. And one of the best ones is, you know, and of course what the billboards do, they're advertising something. They want you to spend money. They want to make profit on you. So one billboard you'll find all over every city in the world is anti-aging cream. I mean, these people should be sued. You know, they should be sued so that they're allowed to get away with that rubbish. But you know what the funny thing, one of the reasons that they're not sued is because so many of us buy it. You know, anti-aging cream, people look, oh, anti-aging, oh yeah, that sounds great, anti-aging cream, let me get some of that. And then you go into the shop, and you get this little 50ml tube, tiny little 50ml tube, and you say, okay, I'll get that. And you say to them, you know, okay, I'll take that, how much is that? Oh, that's €100. Oh, €100. This tiny little thing. Because they're playing on the knowledge of your need to have a product that you think is going to keep you young. Actually, one of the names for Krishna, we said there Krishna, which means the most beautiful or attractive person. So it's a name for the Supreme Person. That's what it is. It's a name for the Supreme Person. Another name for the Supreme Person is Navayovana. Navayovana. And Navayovana means eternally youthful. That the Supreme Person never ages beyond, broadly speaking, the age of 16. Never ages beyond the age of 16. So eternally youthful. Sweet 16. Again, going back to love. All those love songs about 16-year-olds and sweet 16 and blah, blah, blah. So what a beautiful, perfect age. You know, 16 like that. So the Supreme Person, the eternal Supreme Being, never ages beyond the age of 16 like that. And we're all wanting that too. We're all wanting that as well. That's what we want. And you know what? We're the same. We're the same. We are eternally youthful. But once we accept a body, these material bodies, so we're born, we immediately start growing old. And when we're young, we don't think about that so much. You know, we just don't think about it so much. We think we've got our whole life in front of us, etc. You do. Okay, you're very intelligent. You know, what's your name? We have a very intelligent lady here. She does think about it. That's very good. That's very good. So as soon as we're born, we're starting to grow old. And then the next complication, and the reason I was going to say that young people tend not to think about it, at least not as much, unless they're super intelligent like I think. The reason that we don't think about it so much when we're young is we tend to be very fit and healthy. And when you're very fit and healthy, you tend not to think about these things. But as you get older, the third problem kicks in. we have the third problem kicking in. And the third problem that we have is that we have to accept diseases. Diseases, you know. Who wants a disease, you know? If the billboard was saying, you know, any disease you like, you know, only €1,000 for diabetes, you know, 2,000 for cancer, you know, 3,000 for heart disease, you know, they wouldn't sell anything. They wouldn't sell anything because we don't want disease. We don't want it. But you have to accept it. There is no way that you can avoid disease like that. And then the fourth problem, actually there's 5 problems, but the fourth problem is that we die. Now this is a really big problem, as you can well imagine, you know. How many people in the room want to die? Now the reason none of us want to die is very logical. The reason none of us want to die is because we don't die. We don't die, we're eternal. So we certainly don't want to die. We're eternal, and it's what we call a rasa basa, or a contradiction in terms. It's a big, big contradiction. We think we're dying, and the reason we think we're dying is because we have some attachment to the body that we're residing in. We have an attachment to it. When we look in the mirror in the morning and we see the face that we see, we think, oh, that's me. But of course it's not us, you know, we're the eternal spiritual being dwelling in the body. So death is a real problem, because we don't die, and nobody wants to die. I even have a theory, and maybe I shouldn't, okay, I'll mention that. You know, it's a theory because it's speculative. It's not based on the book, so I'm letting you know in advance it's speculative. But I would wager a guess that some of these mental illnesses, like Alzheimer's and dementia, are literally spurred on by people not wanting to face death, because it's such a painful thing. Not painful physically, although it is painful physically too, but mentally it's so painful because we don't actually die, we're eternal spiritual beings. And therefore the mind can do all sorts of tricks. And I would wager that that's a participating factor in people then losing their memory. Because that's what a great way to avoid knowing that you're going to die. You just completely forget who you are, where you are, what you are. You know, so therefore, technically, from your point of view, at least your mental point of view, you're not dying because you have no knowledge of it. But of course, you still do. So the fifth problem, but have a guess what? The fifth problem we can avoid. The fifth problem we can avoid. Because we've accepted these bodies now, we can't avoid old age, we can't avoid disease, and we can't avoid leaving these bodies. Let's use leaving these bodies, because we don't die, we just leave these bodies. But the fifth problem is being born again, and to go through the exact same process again, and again, and again, and again. And because we're eternal, we can just keep going, 1,000 trillion times multiplied by 1,000 trillion times, and we haven't even started. We're still going. But hey, we can stop the process right now by identifying with who we actually are and what our constitutional position is. And once we do that, we can start acting on the spiritual platform. And once we start acting on the spiritual platform and progress through the spiritual stages, then we won't have to come back to take another material body. We will go to a place that is also eternal, that is also full of knowledge, and that is also full of bliss. And actually it's described that the bliss in the spiritual world, it's complete. It's a complete bliss, but have a guess what? It's complete, but it's ever increasing. So it's as best as it ever can be, and then it gets better. And then it's as best as it ever can be, and then it gets better again. So that's what we can do right now, and it's as simple, I mean we can get and discuss a little bit more, but it's as simple as you chant this mantra. You chant this mantra, your eternal spirit soul, when you leave this body, will go directly to the eternal spiritual world, and you will never have to suffer birth, death, old age, disease again. However, as I said at the beginning, Anandamaya Abhyasa, that we are all eternally pleasure-seeking living beings. So there are certain things that we should try to do, as well as chanting this mantra, that will make this mantra more effective. And because the time is getting on, I guess I'll just be able to talk about one of those things. So every living creature is eternally pleasure-seeking. And what is a living creature? We have to define what a living creature is. And fortunately for us, these books actually do define what a living creature is. A living creature is anything that takes birth, anything that grows, anything that has the potential to produce byproducts, in our case babies, anything that grows old, and anything that dies. Anything that goes through those, there's a sixth stage actually, but it doesn't really matter. Anything that goes through those 5 stages, we can identify is a living being, exactly the same as us from a spiritual perspective. From a material perspective, we're all different. Actually, from a spiritual perspective, our personalities are different, by the way. But from a material perspective, we're all different. But from a spiritual perspective, we all have the same quality. So, just as we do not want to suffer, we don't want someone to bang us over the head, with a hammer, or we don't want somebody to, let me think of something really nasty, I'm a man, so I have lots of nasty thoughts, So let me think of, we get somebody, who do we get in the room? Oh, we get, Karma Gaura Prabhu, we get him. And I get, the other devotees here to hold him down on the ground. We'll bring him outside, a nice cold concrete ground, we'll bring him outside. And we'll take off his shoe and socks, and we'll hold him firm to the ground. And I'll take out a big sledgehammer. I carry one with me everywhere. I'll take out a big sledgehammer and I'll put it over my shoulder, and with my full force I'll smash it down on his big toe. This lady is super intelligent. She's now covering her ears because she knows what I'm speaking is really horrible. We'll smash it down on his big toe. For about 3 seconds, he won't feel any pain. But after about 3 seconds, 4 seconds, the pain kicks in. And he will be writhing in agony. But we've only started. Then I'm going to take out a blade. And I'm going to slice his big toenail right off. Slice it right off, throw it away, and now his skin is all exposed. And then I'm going to go to the kitchen and I'm going to get a big open pack of salt. And I'm just going to start pouring salt all over. I think I'll stop now. You get the picture. But people will tell you that this material world is wonderful. They will tell you that. It is wonderful. But think of your big toe. Think of it, go back to the big toe example. How can you enjoy through your big toe? How can you enjoy? One thing you can do is you can maybe get some warm water and put some nice smelling salts in the water and put your toe in there. Maybe you can get someone to massage your toe. I remember years ago, one of the members of the royal family in the UK, they were on holidays, husband and wife were on holidays, but of course the newspaper people, they have those big cameras, so they were on some private island somewhere. Jai, Shishi Gunataki Jai. They were on some private island somewhere. But the newspaper people had these big cameras, and they got the cameras, and at one point, the next day on the newspaper, on the front page of the newspaper, it showed the prince kissing the princess's big toe, like that. So maybe you can enjoy your big toe that way. But basically speaking, the enjoyment that you can receive through your big toe is actually very, very limited. We can do without it, I don't have any mad desire for my big toe to be massaged or whatever. You can do without that pleasure. But the actual pain that you can receive through that thing called your big toe is incredible. And that is the nature of the world that we live in. Yes, there is pleasure, but there is, ratio-wise, there is so much more pain and suffering that can be inflicted on us than the pleasure that we receive. So, going back to the point about all living entities, anything that's born, grows old, etc., is a living being. So the animals are living beings. They're also spiritual beings because they go through that process. The plants are living beings. They go through that process. The insects are living beings. They go through that process. The birds, the reptiles, all of these creatures are living beings. So one thing to help you making progress on your spiritual journey, this mantra, there's nothing more powerful than this mantra to help you do that, but also to be compassionate towards all other living creatures. Compassion is a real key quality, or key attribute, key quality that people who are trying to develop their spiritual side, that they have to also develop this quality of compassion. And it starts with that, not inflicting any pain on other living creatures. Of course, it can go further than that. The reason that the Hare Krishna movement exists, the only reason it exists, the only reason these devotees here, these local devotees here in Copenhagen, maintain this temple and have programs like the Sunday Feast, the only reason they do it is the principle of compassion. That they were so fortunate at some point in time in their lives, they were so fortunate to come in touch, in contact with the knowledge that's contained within the Bhagavad Gita and these other scriptures. And they understand that they are so fortunate to have come in contact with this knowledge that they want to give it to other people as much as they possibly can so that those people can also be fortunate. And then it's like a snowball. Everyone starts giving it to everybody, and soon the whole planet can have this knowledge. And this knowledge it would make the world such an incredibly peaceful and happy and wonderful place if everybody was chanting Hare Krishna, everybody was a vegetarian, not inflicting pain on others. There are other things that this lady is a vegetarian too. She's just amazed. You should be here talking. That's what you should be thinking. But it would be an absolutely wonderful place like that. And you know, I just want to give you one example because in one sense the snowball has started. We've started rolling that snowball. I don't know exactly how big it is, but it's definitely started. And the more people that get behind it, it can just become, the whole world can become inundated with the chanting of Hare Krishna and passing on this knowledge. So we have a real head start, but I'm just going to finish on one thing because it's such an I found it to be such an inspirational story when I first heard it. In the 1850s, in the UK, in a place called Salford. Salford is near Manchester. Manchester is even worse weather than Copenhagen. Honestly, it's worse weather than Copenhagen. So in this place called Salford, in Greater Manchester, in 1850, this was before Charles Dickens' time. Now, I don't know how many of you know Charles, I'm sure you must have heard of Charles Dickens, but this was before, yeah, I knew you'd heard of him, I mean, you know everything. So, this was before his time. Now, if any of you know anything about Charles Dickens, Dickensian London, it was a horrible place, you know. I read an article one time that said in a 2-acre square plot of land in London in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were over 2 million people living in a 2-square-acre plot of land with no sanitation, no running water. Could you imagine that? We nostalgically think of the good old times. We all do it. All of us do it, you know, we nostalgically think of the good old times. Could you imagine living with 2 million other people on, what's 2 acres by 2 acres squared is what? That's 2 by 2 is 4. 4 acres squared, that's all it is, right? On a 4-square-acre piece of land, living with 2 million other people with no sanitation, no running water, no central heating, no heating whatsoever, you know, could you imagine that? How difficult that must have been to actually exist. Anyway, back to the point I was going to make. This was 50 years before that, in Manchester. London is like, you know, the opulent, nice place, you know, and this is like 50 years earlier than London, in this place in Manchester. However, there was a spiritual person. He was a priest, and his name was, believe it or not, this is how you can Google this, it's amazing. His name was William Cowherd. William Cowherd was his name. Krishna, we talked about Krishna earlier, the most beautiful, all-attractive person who is Nava-Yovana, who is eternally youthful. Krishna's occupation, his hobby more than his occupation actually, the thing that Krishna loved to do, he was a cowherd boy. That's what he was. Krishna was a cowherd boy. He loves cows. The cow, mother cow, you've heard that phrase, mother cow. Mother cow. And why is the cow like our mother? She's considered, according to the Vedic scriptures, there are 7 mothers. We have 7 mothers. And one of those mothers is our cow. And that's why in India, the cow is sacred. Like that. So Krishna, he loves the cow. And the reason that she's considered our mother is because she gives us milk, like that. But anyway, William Cowherd was his name. And he was a priest. He was a Protestant priest like that. And he established a new church. He was a rebel. He established a new church. And the one condition for being a member of his church, a congregational member of his church, the one condition, and you had to sign it. He was so strict on it, you had to sign it. This is 1850, so it's 1950, it's 170 years ago, 170 years ago, there or thereabouts. And you had to sign it. The condition was, you had to be a vegetarian. You could not satisfy your tongue and your belly on the blood of other living entities like that. He was practically the only vegetarian in the UK, probably the only vegetarian practically in Europe at the time, who knows. Can you imagine how much that was against the trend of the day? But he did that. All the local and indeed the regional newspapers around that area, every time one of his congregation died, they would put it on the front page of the newspaper and they would say, "Another vegetarian dead." The implication being that vegetarianism is unhealthy, makes you weak, etc., etc., etc. So he had all this propaganda against him. But nonetheless, he continued on, established his church, and his successor became the founder of the Vegetarian Society in the UK. And now, vegetarianism is such a popular and so many people. But just to explain, just to reiterate that point, that's one thing. There are other things that we can do, but today we're out of time, more or less. The one thing you can do, take away from today, is if you're not already a vegetarian, become a vegetarian. It's for your own well-being. It's your own well-being. It's not, in that sense, it's nothing to me whether somebody becomes a vegetarian or not. I mean, in one sense, it's not really anything to me. But for the person themselves, you cannot imagine. I'm going to finish with a really dramatic quote from these Vedic teachings. A really dramatic quote. And that dramatic quote is that we've already explained about being eternal, so that means there's never any end to our existence. So we can come back into this world, this material world, forever. We literally can. It's stated in these teachings that if you either kill or sell or cook or eat the flesh of an animal, particularly the flesh of a cow, because, as explained, the cow is like our mother. If you kill, sell, cook, eat the flesh of a cow, you have to come back to this world and suffer that same fate of being killed like that. You have to come back to this world for as many times as there are hairs on the back of the cow, on the body of the cow. Now when you look at a cow from a distance, it kind of looks like it's just skin almost. But you go up close to a cow and you put your finger onto their back like that, and you will see there are just millions of tiny little compact hairs that make up the cow's outer skin like that. So it's not in my interest. It's in my interest to be a vegetarian, but it's in everybody's interest, because we have to realize there is no such thing as a free lunch. For every action we perform in this world, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And, even Jesus Christ said, and we're in the month of December coming up to Christmas, he said, "Thou shalt not kill." Now, I would guess that Jesus Christ is probably at least as intelligent as you. I'm not saying he's more intelligent, but I'd say he's at least as intelligent as you. Now, Jesus Christ said, "Thou shalt not kill." When I asked different people, many years ago, I don't do it anymore, when I became a vegetarian actually, how is it that Christians are not vegetarians? Of course, many Christians are vegetarians, but just the general teachings, how is it that Christians are not vegetarian? The answer I got, primarily from priests actually, the answer I got was, no. What Christ meant was, "Thou shalt not murder." And of course my response to that is, do you think Jesus Christ couldn't have said that if that's what he meant? You're interpreting the words that he said, so you're more intelligent than the person who's your Saviour. He didn't say "thou shalt not murder," he said "thou shalt not kill." And actually, if you go back in time, you will see many different traditions. If you take the Jewish tradition, I know I'm going on now, actually I have to stop, but if you take the Jewish tradition as an example, my father went, because he's a Christian Catholic, he went to Israel about 15 years ago. He's passed away now, but he wanted to go to the Holy Land before he died. And when he came back, whenever I saw him after he came back, I asked him, how was your visit to Israel, to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and all these places? And he said, oh, it was absolutely wonderful. And my sister went with him. And my sister said, no, but tell him the thing that you didn't like. And the thing that he didn't like was, every evening with his evening meal, he couldn't get any milk for his tea. So for the previous 65, 70 years, whatever it was, every time he has a cup of tea, he would have milk with it. But he couldn't get milk. And the reason he couldn't get milk is because the Jewish tradition, the kosher tradition, is that if you take the life of an animal, well, the first thing you have to do, you have to drain all the blood out of it. This goes back to when the Israelites were banished the Jews were banished to the desert and like that, and they asked God, what will we eat? And God said, well, you can eat manna from heaven. And manna is a vegetarian, vegetable type thing, vegetable-based thing. So they did that, they were eating the manna, but then they got bored with the manna. And they went back to God and they said, oh, can we not eat something else? You know, we're bored with eating just this manna. Anyway, they got into this whole negotiation with God, you know. And God agreed, okay, well, you can eat fowl. That's what he said, you can eat like birds and that type of thing, you know. However, you cannot drink their blood. You cannot have any of their blood. You can have their flesh, but you cannot have their blood. I've never done this, but I can guarantee you it's true. That's almost impossible. So what they do is they cut the neck, they drain all the blood out, they soak it in warm water, they soak it in cold water, they soak it back in warm water, and they leave it for 24 hours and all that kind of thing, in the hope that they get all the blood out. But actually it's an impossible thing for them to do, to get all the blood out like that. But the other thing they have to do is, from the time that they eat the flesh of that animal, they cannot have any milk from the same animal, not the same animal, but from animals. They cannot have any milk. It's like a trade-off, a penance. It's like and it's so crystal clear for anybody who's a little bit intelligent. So you'll definitely take this point on board. Anybody who's a little bit intelligent is that they'll understand God didn't want them eating animals and birds and fowl. He didn't want them. That's why he told them, you know, you have to get rid of all the blood. That's why he told them, after you've eaten the flesh, you cannot take any milk from those creatures for 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever the condition was. It's obvious what God wanted. And as we know, the Supreme Person, he has our interests at heart. The Supreme Person is wanting the best for us. He doesn't want us to suffer karmic reaction and suffer in this world. So let's take his advice. From whatever tradition you come from, it doesn't matter. There is only one Supreme Person. If there was more than one Supreme Person, then obviously that person wouldn't be supreme, because there's more than one. So there's only one Supreme Person, and that Supreme Person isn't a Catholic, isn't a Protestant, isn't a Jew, isn't a Hindu, isn't a Muslim. Completely transcendental to all those designations, those material designations like that. So we all should just embrace what's best for us, the advice that we get, if we study carefully enough, the advice we get from all religious traditions. And I leave you with the message today that if you're not a vegetarian, please become a vegetarian. And by the way, you know, you don't lose weight and you don't become all weak and feeble. I've been vegetarian for over 35 years, and you know, all I ever do is put weight on. I don't lose it, you know. So from today, chant Hare Krishna mantra and have a vegetarian diet. Hare Krishna. If anybody had, maybe I can take one question if anybody has any questions. I should have stopped earlier for questions, but if anybody has a question or a comment, please feel free to ask. Particularly if any of our you're together, so you're both here for the first time, right? Yeah, okay. Particularly if any of you have anything that you'd like to ask, you're most welcome. But anybody at all? Yes, sir?
I'm curious to why milk is allowed.
Yes, good question. You can also ask the same question, by the way, about vegetables, because they're also living creatures, living entities. So, in this book, there's one verse. This book, by the way, called Bhagavad Gita. Just like we said, Krishna is a name for the Supreme, Govinda is a name for the Supreme, Navayovana, etc. This is another name, Bhagavan, or Bhagavad, Bhagavan. And so this, and Gita, the word Gita means the song. So this is the song of the Supreme, if you like. And it's literally like that. These verses, these Sanskrit verses, you actually sing them. You know, there's a meter and a rhyme to them like that. So in one of these verses, Krishna speaking, and he's saying that if you offer